So today I'm going to be talking about interpartner dating violence. So there are several types of dating violences. In this picture depicted is obviously physical violence, but there's also sexual, psychological, emotional, and verbal abuse, which psychological seems to be a little silent but deadly. Not very many people notice that it's even happening. So who does this happen to? So this is occurring in emerging adulthood, which the book classifies as ages 16 to 24. This can happen to men and women, people in same-sex relationships, people in heterosexual relationships. The younger side may be at risk because they are unaware that this is even a problem. And the older side, it may be at risk because they may be cohabitating and they may not have the resources or the money to move out of that situation. And they're sleeping next to their abuser every night, so that may be a little dangerous for them. So now I'm going to talk about the statistics in the U.S. and then the statistics in New Mexico. So this is done, I got this from the status of women in the states. I couldn't find very much about men, unfortunately. So 47.1% of women report psychological abuse, 31.5% report physical abuse, 9.2% report stalking, 8.8% report rape, and other sexual violence was reported 15.8%. And then in New Mexico in 2013, New Mexico was ranked second in the entire United States for domestic violence. 57 per 100,000 people experience domestic violence, and 1 to 60% of people are raped. Domestic death accounts for 40 to 54% of adults. According to the CDC, this does a lot of damage to the victims as well. So some things that the CDC lists is depression, anxiety, unhealthy behaviors, binge drinking, drug, tobacco use, eating disorders, suicidal thought, and antisocial behavior, which these can all very much hurt your cognitive development and your biosocial development and your psychosocial development. So as pertaining to the depression and anxiety that it can cause, during your biosocial development, you already have an increased risk of mental illness. So this is just increasing your risks even more. If you have unhealthy behaviors like you're eating more or you're not exercising, you have a more increased risk of chronic illness during this time. And as far as your cognitive development, this is pertaining to the antisocial perspective. During this time of college, for the older side, you are developing dialectic thinking, and you may not develop that if you're not getting all these different perspectives and if you're not talking to people all the time. Or the obvious one, if you happen to drop out while you're getting a higher education, you're not going to be getting that education that you would have been getting. And then in your psychosocial development, also pertaining to the antisocial part, is that you won't have anyone to talk to, and you may not learn the best relationship strategies or even social skills. And now I'm going to talk about the warning signs of domestic violence. So I got this from the National Center on Domestic and Sexual Violence. So there's physical, which is probably the most obvious, but I just wanted to make it clear this is in the intent to hurt people. So if you're slapping, hitting, punching, in the intent to hurt people. Then there's psychological, verbal, emotional, and sexual, which can be peer pressure, malicious lies, isolation and exclusion, which can affect your psychosocial development if you're not talking to people. This is when they control who you see, talk to, where you go, and they justify it by jealousy. Then there's sexual coercion, intimidation, anger and emotional abuse, where they're putting you down all the time. And then there's minimize, deny, and blame, which is where you make light of the abuse, and then they minimize it by saying that it doesn't really matter or they don't take it seriously. Then they deny that it happened, and then they turn it around and blame it on you. And then now we're going to talk about factors and prevention. So we have to learn about the factors before we understand the prevention. So some factors are parent upbringing, low SES, prior history of being abusive, personality disorders, less education or awareness, and the book also pointed out the cultural acceptance and poor impulse control. So some prevention strategies from the CDC was school-based, so teaching kids dating violence, parent involvement so that people can come home and say that something happened to them and have someone believe them, because only 33% are reported. And the book also notes halting maltreatment to children. And now I'm going to talk about some local help here in New Mexico. So there is a place called the Domestic Violence Resource Center of New Mexico. They do a lot of cool things. They put on life skills trainings, they have parenting classes, they have coping skills for survivors, and United Way also helps out by putting on empowerment workshops, which is really cool. This is a really big issue that really hits home to me, and I hope to any other college student, because you're so much at risk for this. So if you know anyone or anything here or anywhere else, there's tons of resources, and it's really important that people are educated on this, which is what I feel like can probably help a lot, is just if people are educated on this sort of thing.